Greetings fellow Skywatchers. In this video I want to take a look at the recent developments around solar geoengineering in the UK. Initially, this was going to be a quick look at the parliamentary debate on the petition to ban geoengineering, followed by some suggestions for those who want to take action to stop solar geoengineering. But in the course of putting the material for the video together, I've done a deeper dive into the proposals by ARIA to conduct taxpayer-funded sun-dimming experiments and discovered some things that people really need to know. So this video will cover the parliamentary debate and some details about the ARIA research, and a second video will look at some possible ways forward. So stay tuned. The context for the petition and parliamentary debate were the revelations in the mainstream media that the British government, via the Advanced Research and Innovation Agency, or ARIA, is to fund a series of research projects to explore ways of dimming the sun and cooling the climate, including some UK-based outdoor experiments. If you don't know about this, you'll find details in the previous Skywatch video. It's impossible to overstate the significance of this news. I know that some people will say, oh, weather modification has been going on for ages, but we're now entering a new phase of overt and increasing attempts to dim the sun. And it's clear that the UK is the testing ground for worldwide geoengineering. This is a test of public consent. If things continue as they are, with most of the population unaware and a minority commenting about the state of the skies amongst themselves on social media, the collective response of the British will be taken as tacit consent. Meanwhile, as what I'm going to show in this video demonstrates, the politicians charged with the responsibility to scrutinise policies that affect us are deeply ignorant of what's involved in the ARIA plans. The parliamentary debate about the petition to ban geoengineering in the UK took place on the 23rd of June 2025, in case you're watching this a lot later, which was coincidentally 2 days after London's first geoengineering protest organised by American filmmaker Matt Landman. By that point, the petition had got around 160,000 signatures. Not many given the gravity of the issue, but significantly over the 100,000 required to trigger a parliamentary debate. It's important to understand that in Westminster, a debate triggered by a public petition doesn't carry much weight politically. Most parliamentary debates are initiated by the government when it introduces a piece of new legislation. They then form part of a process of scrutiny which can be quite extensive and can bring about big changes. Other debates in Parliament can be introduced by individual MPs as a way of raising issues. They tend to be short and don't usually result in any immediate change. Debates triggered by petitions are similar, except that because they often raise an issue the political class is not keen to address, vaccine safety comes to mind, they're often treated as a kind of technical requirement. So there was never any chance that the debate on geoengineering would result in a ban. And any kind of admission from government that weather modification is already happening was also unrealistic, as was any acknowledgement that the ARIA research poses real concerns. This is part of the email I got from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero as a signatory of the petition. You can see that it repeats the government's official position on this, that the government is not, well, it says here it's not in favour of using solar radiation modification. Usually it says it's not doing any, and that it has no plans for deployment. What the debate in Parliament did provide was an opportunity to put public concern on the record and to raise wider awareness about the very dangerous path we're on. This is what a number of campaigners, including Skywatch, tried to do in the run-up to the debate, prompting people to get in touch with their MPs with relevant information. There's a very low level of knowledge about weather modification in the UK. Most people aren't even aware the technology exists, and this ignorance extends to our elected representatives. Replies to emails I've seen from MPs illustrate how little they know about geoengineering. But because weather modification experiments are now officially going ahead in the UK, MPs should be taking the matter seriously and taking the trouble to inform themselves. With that, let's take a look at the debate. And this is the picture of how it began. The first thing you'll notice is how empty the room is. Almost none of our 650 elected representatives in Parliament attended, although a couple more MPs did come in after the debate had begun. Most of the people in the room are officials running the proceedings or members of the team behind the petition. The debate was opened by Ros Savage, the Lib Dem MP for the South Cotswolds. Her background is interesting. She's not your typical MP, having been a solo ocean rower before her election to Parliament in 2024. She describes herself as a committed environmentalist and was the MP behind the recent Climate and Nature Bill, which, had it been passed, could have taken us back to pre-industrial times. In her opening speech, Savage made clear her opposition to solar radiation management, citing the possibility of unintended consequences, the potential catastrophe of termination shock if geoengineering measures were suddenly stopped, and the harm posed by chemicals such as aluminium, including the role of sulfates in depleting the ozone layer. She also highlighted the ill wisdom of trying to control the weather and of conducting a planetary experiment with no ability to reverse if things go wrong. All good points, which most of us would agree with. Pippa Heylings, the Lib Dem spokesperson for energy security and net zero, talked for 7 minutes about decarbonisation before repeating the government mantra that it is not deploying SRM and has no plans to do so. But she did say that SRM should not go to full deployment and that the ARIA experiments were not a good use of taxpayers' money. Next, Conservative MP Nick Timothy said his party opposed any attempts to seed the skies and that SRM would be a reckless experiment that risks all our futures. This is an interesting position for the Conservative Party to hold, given that ARIA was established under the last Conservative government, with the help of Dominic Cummings, in an attempt to emulate the United States Advanced Research Projects Agency. The idea was also to get round the regulatory constraints which apply to UK Research and Innovation, a body which, by the way, is also doing SRM research without the outdoor element. ARIA was created by an Act of Parliament, with the legislation taking nearly 2 years to go through Parliament, ample time for scrutiny by MPs. When it was finally established in 2023, ARIA was exempted from Freedom of Information requests and funded by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, with an annual budget of $800 million. So the previous government, with the approval of Parliament, created an arm's-length state body with a lot of freedom and public money, but without the usual mechanisms to ensure accountability and transparency. It's a recipe for mad science and out-of-control projects. The official line from the government that ARIA is independent is misleading and is clearly being used by politicians to distance themselves from taking responsibility for what they are enabling. No one who's paying any real attention to public policy should fall for this. In his speech, Nick Timothy said he believes that the ARIA research will not involve any practical experiments. It's hard to understand why he thinks this, given the furore in the media about the outdoor experiments and the fact that they're clearly stated on the ARIA website. Then Kerry McCarthy, the Climate Minister, responded on behalf of the government. She briefly reassured Timothy that no weather modification activities were currently taking place and asserted that the cloud-creating lines we see in the skies are just persistent contrails. She went on to talk at some length about, wait for it, decarbonisation, and expressed excitement about giant kelp. When she got onto SRM, the minister made it clear that she was placing the government's official position on the record. The government is not deploying solar radiation modification and has no plans to do so, she said. There will be no spraying of chemicals in the skies in the UK for SRM, geoengineering, or climate remediation. End quote. Now, this statement is very odd indeed, because the description on the ARIA website makes it clear that one of the biggest projects, UK-based and funded, will involve emissions by aircraft, in other words, spraying. And here it is, de-risking cirrus modification, over 3.5 million over 3 years. Documents obtained through a Freedom of Information request and published by Lewis Brackpoll on Courage Media give more details and mention silver iodide, a substance long associated, controversially, with cloud seeding as one of the chemicals that could be used in this research. Had the Climate Minister nor her advisors not read the relevant documents? Does the UK government not know about the project it is funding with taxpayers' money? The Minister also contradicted ARIA's position on the purpose of the research, as reported in the Telegraph. So in this piece here, the Telegraph reporter paraphrases what ARIA people, possibly Mark Symes, who's leading on this research, said. They're hopeful that if the experiments prove a success, they could be scaled up and implemented within 10 years. But in the debate, the Climate Minister assured MPs that the experiments were just being conducted because SRM is so poorly understood. We may have a very clear commitment not to deploy it, but we need to understand what would happen if other people chose to do so, she said. That's a new one. I'm reminded of Squealer in George Orwell's Animal Farm. Every time the animals started to notice things that didn't make sense, he came up with a new, semi-plausible explanation to quieten their suspicions. There is, of course, a political explanation for Kerry McCarthy's words, which are clearly the product of behind-the-scenes briefings from Whitehall officials and not the result of her looking at relevant documents herself. Since the news of the ARIA research broke, there's been considerable public backlash against the idea of dimming the sun. The subject has had a lot of media coverage, and it's clear that MPs have been getting quite a bit of correspondence from concerned constituents too. Oh, and by the way, the head of ARIA has just resigned. This might explain why the Climate Minister came up with this new post hoc reason to convince UK citizens that we need to support sun-dimming research. Dangerous foreigners might start doing it, so we'd just better keep up. And that was the end of the short debate. In her closing remarks, Savage said she was reassured by the government's reassurances. But she did not sound reassured to me. I trust that the work being done is not opening a door. Humanity has form, she said. Once we know something is possible, we're not always good at holding ourselves back from deploying it. And then she said something that really resonates with me as a lifelong skywatcher who loves the natural world. And she warned against the hubris of trying to interfere in fundamental natural processes. So let's hold on to that, the fact that the only politician who seemed genuinely interested in the debate understands at least the core issue. Now I want to take a look at the ARIA research and highlight the gap between what the government is saying and what is actually happening. The ARIA programme involves awarding funding to 21 research teams, some in the UK and some in other countries, to explore various aspects of climate cooling. They range from experimental atmospheric science to studies in how best to communicate with the public about all this, with projects on space-based sun dimming, the use of volcanic ash to block sunlight, and the dispersal of sun dimming substances by drones. I want to focus on one project in particular, the UK-based project which involves outdoor experiments. This, the one on the screen now, will be conducted by a team of international researchers led by Imperial College London, the institution that's gained notoriety for its inflated modelling figures during COVID and other crises. The material on the ARIA website about it is fairly general, but the annex published by Brackpoll makes it crystal clear the project involves cloud seeding through the dispersion of chemicals into the atmosphere by planes. Yes, that's right, this is an official project to create chemtrails. The plan is to see if soot emissions by aircraft can produce cirrus cloud on demand. The description in Annex 2 makes much of the fact that the research is divided into 3 phases, emphasising how scientists are taking a cautious approach in order to minimise risk to the public. Using aviation soot to create cloud should not cause concern, they reason, because such emissions would be the same as the ones normally left by planes in the course of their flights. Already loud alarm bells should be sounding, because in the rest of the world we are constantly being told about the damage aircraft emissions are doing to the planet and how they're contributing to climate change. This is the reason that flights are carrying extra taxes, and that politicians and other unelected people keep suggesting that more taxes and even restrictions on flying in the form of carbon allowances will be needed. This begs the question, why would government fund a programme of research to increase aircraft emissions? There's more. If aviation soot, as ARIA puts it, should prove not effective enough to produce cloud capable of dimming the sun, the researchers will then move on to phase 2 of the project, which will involve putting additives and metal oxides into the aircraft fuel. So, as well as studying the ice nucleation activity of soot under cirrus conditions, we will study the potential role of impurities from fuel additives and metal oxides from engines known to nucleate ice under cirrus conditions. There, the footnote takes you to some quite old literature on cloud seeding, on the ice nucleating activity of aviation aerosol. This will be done by adding materials to the fuels in the burner so that we produce contaminated soots. So I hope that's clear. The plan is to deliberately produce contaminated soots and put them into the atmosphere to see if they have cloud creating capacity. As a side note, it's interesting that in the States, Robert F. Kennedy has recently said he believes much of the spraying of the American skies is coming out of jet fuel. Now let's take a look at the outdoor experiments. Researchers plan to organise a flight campaign to produce cirrus cloud at FAM, which stands for the Facility for Airborne Atmospheric Measurements. This publicly funded organisation describes itself as an airborne laboratory, enabling research into the atmosphere by scientists with the help of the Met Office. It has its own fleet of highly modified aircraft to carry out science missions. FARM will run the cloud seeding flights for the ARIA project in, and I'm quoting, a cirrus forming region that is within the range of the FARM home base, Cranfield, and large enough that we can see both modified and unmodified areas. Cranfield Airport is in Bedfordshire, not far from Milton Keynes, or, as the plane flies, from London. So the potential area of spraying by the ARIA project team is in fact much of England and Scotland. The description also adds that a high potential target is the Scottish Highlands. While I was watching the parliamentary debate for the second time and grappling with the extent to which the government is misleading MPs and the public, I went to get a drink and, as I usually do, took a good look out of the back door. I saw a familiar sight. The sky was suddenly full of cirrus cloud, with some of the trails that had given rise to that cloud clearly visible. Only an hour or so earlier, the sky had been clear and blue. But as so often happens these days, in the period up to sunset, numbers of planes fly in the area around the sun, leaving trails which form light blocking cloud. And you can see exactly how that happens if you haven't already in real time in the first Skywatch video. As I worked on this video the following day, I also went to look out of the back window and my jaw dropped and I said, what the is that? Because I saw a strange band of cloud, the like of which I've never seen before. The picture doesn't quite convey how striking it was. This camera is intended for vlogging and doesn't do stills so well, but you can get an idea of how it looked. I've got certain idea about the origins of this strange band, and we'll probably look at that in a future video. But for now, let's just keep this picture in mind as we look at the takeaways from the parliamentary debate and the ARIA research. Takeaway number 1, we cannot trust the government on geoengineering. If after hearing and seeing all this, you're able to take the assurances of the climate minister in the geoengineering debate at face value, well, I have a number of sea-facing properties in Bedfordshire to sell you. This holds true regardless of what we think about individual politicians. I can quite believe that Kerry McCarthy, as an individual, is convinced she's representing the situation accurately. But we are dealing with a very tangled web here, and the official government explanations are inconsistent with the facts. I invite anyone still in doubt about this to check the documents themselves. The links will be in the description box. But there's a good thing to come out of the geoengineering petition and parliamentary debate, and that's that the issue is now well and truly on the record. Spinning the facts can only work for a time. The truth always comes out in the end. Takeaway number 2. MPs are profoundly underinformed about the implications of solar geoengineering and what the government is doing. The tiny number who were interested enough to turn up to the debate, which did not include anyone from the Green Party or Reform, didn't seem to have read the relevant documents and so were woefully unable to have a real debate or to challenge the official line from the minister. So takeaway number 2 is that currently Britain's MPs are off the job, failing in their duty of scrutiny over what's possibly the most important issue of our times. Takeaway number 3. All the MPs who spoke at the debate, both Conservatives and Lib Dems were represented, opposed the use of SRM, and I suspect that some of the less captured Labour MPs are of like mind. So there is a consensus against solar geoengineering based on the fundamental understanding that humans should not be interfering with nature on this scale. We can take heart from this. If MPs understood what is really going on, many could become worried enough to take action, as both politicians and humans. After all, their lives and those of their children depend on it, and politicians generally tend to be concerned about how they're seen by the public. So the big takeaway is that the responsibility for stopping all this sun-dimming nonsense lies with us, the public. Do we want to live under darkened skies, with our water, soil and our bodies increasingly contaminated by chemicals? Unless we're going to give in to apathy and a sense of hopelessness as our health and environment steadily deteriorate, it seems to me that we've got 2 paths ahead of us. One path involves educating our political leaders about the realities of solar geoengineering and the government's real plans. After all, the only way the regulation of geoengineering is going to come about is through government and the legal system. The misrepresentation of the situation by ARIA and the government is actually helpful to us here, but suppose that route, lobbying and campaigning MPs, just takes too long. The other path involves raising public awareness and creating a culture in which interfering with the weather is unacceptable. So much so that the individuals and agencies involved no longer want to do it. I'll say more about this in the next video. This is a story of many social movements in the past. Change came from the ground up, with opposition spreading across society until legislation was really just a formality. These two approaches aren't mutually exclusive. There's room for both of them, and the second one involves many different activities, from the very small and doable to the ambitious and highly organised. And I will look at a few of them in the next video. In the meantime, please do like, subscribe and share this as widely as you can. And if you found this information useful, you can now show support for this channel by buying me a coffee. When I did the first Skywatch video, my intention was simply to get the ball rolling to help start a long overdue movement against weather modification in the UK. Since then, it's become clear that while there is huge concern about it, with tens of thousands of people expressing dismay about what's going on in the skies on social media networks all the time, very little is being done to counter it. So this is to say that the gravity of the threat we face, combined with the absence of a real movement in Britain, is drawing me in deeper than I anticipated. Any support would be appreciated. So, bye for now and keep watching the skies.